Thank you for staying with a Checkpoint. And at this point, let's join Sophia Wanuna, who is live for us from Mombasa, having that sit down with COTU Secretary General Francis Atwoli. Sophia.
And Labour Day was marked just a few days ago, 1st of May. A lot was said on that day. It will make part of our conversation this evening. And remember, you can't be part of it. If you have any question for Secretary General Atwoli, you can tweet me at Sophia Wanuna. Several of you have, and I will be putting your questions to him. Thank you so much, sir, for making time for Checkpoint this evening. I want us to begin on the controversial housing levy. And of course, so many developments around that. It's a matter that is still before court. But let's unpack it in as far as those developments. You're due in court May 20th, I believe. That's just in a few days. The judge had asked that the various parties go and, come back and register their position or positions on this particular date. So perhaps let's begin at, because FKE on the out-of-court settlements had indicated they were never involved and opposed it, on 20th of May when you return to court, have you agreed or what's the status?
Thank you very much, Sister Sophie. Before I go there, let me take this special opportunity to join our sisters, our mothers, and our daughters who are mothers in one way or another during the International Mother's Day, which is today. And I vividly remember my own late mother, how she loved me. And one of the things she did teach me was how to use Vaseline, of which I still use Vaseline ointment up to date. Having said that, Sophie, I have a lot of respect for mothers and sisters and women per se. Having said that, Sister Sophie, let me come to this very pertinent issue of 1.5% housing levy. I think each and everything, as far as we as at COTU are concerned, concerning that particular area of deductions from our wages is with our lawyers. But I want to tell you this, Sophie. The government is the main employer, like another employer. That an employer who is a member of the Federation of Kenya Employers. The difference is that government is not a member of the Federation of Kenya Employers. But we negotiate with the government as Central Organization of Trade Unions on minimum wage. After the government has announced minimum wage, it sets pace for us to review and renew our CBAs. And when we came to this particular issue, we were, as I have said time and again, we went to State House, and there was a little bit disagreement as per how this 1.5 will be implemented. So we decided as COTU Executive Board, the best way to go about it, let's go to court to annul this so that we can bring the parties on the table to negotiate and see how best we can implement it. And as we did so, it is us who went to court, not Federation of Kenya Employers. We begged them to come and join us. The case was ours. But when we reached somewhere in the process, that's between December last year and January, we asked the government that, one, last year during Labour Day, the government had announced wage increase on minimum, on top of minimum wage by 5%, and they had not gazetted it. We asked the government, why do you want to levy us? First of all, you have not gazetted 5% 7 months down the line since May last year. Now, you are asking us again to part away with 1.5%. Immediately, they gazetted that in January. After that gazettement, we met again and we said, as we want to negotiate now, because the government has agreed to come on the table, you cannot negotiate with your employer under duress. You know, employer and worker relationship is just like marriage. Those recognition agreement, collective bargaining agreement, the International Labour Organization Conventions number 87, number 98, and number 95 on protection of wages brings us together to negotiate. Dialogue, to enter into dialogue. So when we decided that, we said, okay, for our members, they will be safe if the government increases 15% general wage increase. General wage increase, it means every worker in this respect will be able to get 15% across the board. Out of 15%, if government wants to take 1.5%, there is no problem.
So let's go one by one so that we don't go over issues. Let's begin with to the question. We'll go over everything you've mentioned. So on 20th, have you agreed with FKE? Because whilst you say you went to court, bottom line is they're an enjoined party. So you are joined at the hip on this one. Petitioner, they're part of it. They cannot be ignored. So have you agreed at this point when you go on 20th back to court, or will they have to declare their position and you will proceed to leave this petition?
We have asked our lawyers to convene a meeting between the parties, the Office of the Attorney General, the Federation of Kenya Employers, lawyers, and our lawyers.
There's only 8 days to go?
Yeah,
meeting hasn't happened yet?
I think they will be meeting before 20th so that they can be able to strike a compromise. And if they don't, as the main people, as the people who had the main suit in court, which is the Central Organization of Trade Unions, we have asked our lawyers to put out of this case because we had negotiations. For example, I will tell you, a day before Labor Day, that was the last day of the month of April, is when the councils, which are in charge of negotiating, they are known as wages councils. We have one for agriculture and the other one for general wage increase. They had not been gazetted. Their time had elapsed some times back, and they were gazetted on a day before Labor Day. So the negotiations are going on, and we don't want to negotiate with our employer with a knife at the neck. You know,
but it's not. Yeah, it's not a knife at the neck when we look at the petition you lodged, Mr. Secretary General, because first of all, you outlined the several issues that led to opposition of the housing levy. And one of the key areas, and I want to read for you part of what is said and captured in your petition, around why you felt there was no public participation and how strongly this meant. It says that it behoves the correspondent in enacting legislation to ensure that the spirit of public participation is attained both quantitatively and quantitatively and qualitatively. It is not enough to simply correspond or convene board meetings, it is, as it were, and leave it to those who are scavenged for information resulting from such meetings or correspondence. The respondents ought to do whatever is reasonable to ensure that as many Kenyans are aware of the intention to amend legislation. And you go on to list so many other grounds and reasons why you felt public participation did not take place. So that when Kenyans come back and hear there was an out-of-court settlement, you're saying other things were gazetted, but they're not the reasons why you went to court. You went to court on the housing levy. In this petition, you make a very strong case for why you even believe it's unconstitutional, null and void. So the government agrees on different issues, and you let go of this. Isn't that betrayal of the cause for which you moved to court?
It's not a question of betrayal. That's just part of what made us go to court. We still have some other areas that we are negotiating. Even if the fund, that levy will be in place, representation, of which we have already pushed that if it has got to go on, the Federation of Kenya Employers and the Central Organization of the Trade Unions must sit on the implementing board to know how that money will be collected from workers and employers and how the money will be used. Just like the way we sit on NSSF, the way we sit on NHIF. Those are some of the things that we are also demanding in the ongoing negotiations. That is part just of negotiation. When it comes to public participation, yes, that is the policy of the government. If the government wants to win or it wants to put a legislation in place, that is an obvious matter for it to know that there is public participation.
And there wasn't, in your view, there wasn't.
No,
so what has changed?
Let me tell you, we are not per se, though we speak for non-employed and those employed, but we have specific constituency to protect. That's why, and members of public are also free. Anybody from members of public who feels aggrieved, like the consumers organization, COFEC, they are free to walk to court and seek justice. But we have a specific constituency of membership. As we speak for every Kenyan, we are not a political party.
But SG, while I agree with you, this is your affidavit. You swore it. You make a case here for public participation. You go ahead to say that this is another point to make regarding public participation, that whilst you've been advised by your council and are inagreeable, because the government is derived from the people, all citizens have the right to influence government decisions and the government should respond to them. Therefore, participation must certainly entail citizens. You go to great lengths to explain the importance of this. Now you're telling me other people can go and pursue this agenda.
Because you see,
but so you've gone back on your own word and your own push for this public participation.
As we were doing that,
yeah,
we were drawing the government to what it's supposed to do,
and
or what it ought to do.
But has it done it?
Let me tell you. But once we slash out, because this is through dialogue and through our own negotiations between us and the government for particular area that we represent, for the particular area of our constituency, we slide off our cake, we sit down with the government, we say, those people who will be affected will be working men and women of this country. Are you prepared to give us 15% general wage increase?
It hasn't said yes. It hasn't agreed to 15%.
And I can assure you, those are the negotiations that we are having. And as I know, for sure and for free, we cannot come out without that. Because there must be a certain percentage to caution that.
So then what ground are you negotiating from? Because you have conceded, you said you will not pursue this matter further. So public participation that you've let down, you had argued about transparency and how this is not clear, is null and void. But also, sir, still touching on this, the agreement, which was private, so this is a public interest matter, that COTU and the government privately signed an agreement, not informing everybody who they informed publicly they were going to court.
Let me
How are the workers to know that you're really standing with them?
It was not privately. I went public after signing that agreement, if you can recall.
Yes, yeah.
We called a press conference and we informed everybody. And let me tell you, the art of negotiations or art of entering into dialogue, be it private or public, is through good faith and trust. So you cannot say this, you cannot cast aspersions on what you have not already entered into and come out with. The question will be that the ongoing negotiations, if we didn't achieve our desired demand, which is 15% general wage increase, or something thereat, that can caution that 1.5%. That is when people will be able to question the court. You people withdraw. You did withdraw from the court. You people, you said now you are in the middle of negotiations between the organization and the government in good faith, as it is laid down. You people, you have a solid responsibility to negotiate with the government as the main employer. Not only that, for the last 20 years, we have been negotiating with the government on minimum wage, 18, 14, 15%.
Right.
This is in good faith, and we trust that through that negotiations in good faith, government will come out positively. And at no time, I can assure you, Sophie, we have negotiated with the government and came out without anything.
But then, takes us back to why someone would question what was even the intention of this petition. That you are abandoning it whilst it has not solved, hold on, it has not solved that which you pray to the court in this petition. You describe lack of public participation and criticize convening of board meetings, which is what you have gone ahead to do. But more importantly, the 0.5 which you say you have gotten, I mean, yes, the increase in minimum wage, that had already been given. It was an issue of gazetting. So it's not really a win. But you already had gotten it as employees.
Absolutely.
Number two, the gazetting of NSSF, COTU and FKE to the board, that's what you are given in that deal. That has nothing to do with the petition. So the question is, was this really ever about the housing levy, or was it something totally? Because what has been achieved
Let me tell you, first and foremost, I want you to create a departure from this issue of public participation. Because,
I'm picking it from your petition.
I want to tell you,
yes,
we have specific membership that we represent. Those who pay their union dues in their unions, those who are affiliate of the Central Organization of Trade Unions, and they pay direct to us. And the purpose, let me tell you, our art on negotiations, even the purpose of giving or issuing strike notice, or not only threatening, is to bring employer on the table.
So you
once the employer agrees to come on the table and sit down on the table, now it is up to me to use my skills of negotiations and get out of him. But before, when the employer is just still talking on the other side there and is not coming to the table, I must compel the employer to come to the table.
So you are disowning,
one of the purposes of us going, just a moment,
this affidavit.
Sophie. The purposes of us going to court was to bring the employer to the table. The employer has now agreed.
You're misusing the judicial system then, sir.
Let me tell you.
That you're using it to get people to talk. When they talk, then you abandon. There's money going into that, taxpayers' money. I believe it's workers' money used to pay these lawyers, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So you're saying, let's abuse the court process. Once they come to the table...
It is not. Let me tell you.
You abandoned. Because then you were disowning everything you swore in your affidavit.
Going to court, you go to court willfully. Coming out of the court, you come out of the court willfully. You don't go to court through coercion or being forced so that you are abusing the court processes. And what we are doing is within the law and within our own rights.
Right.
And if I was employer or you are an employer, and your employees don't want to come out and sit with you on the table, and they want to threaten or they want to negotiate with you under duress, then you will not respond. So we are saying, let the government come and sit with us. We have done several sittings with the government up to where we are, and now the laid down procedures, which are part of enormous industrial relations machinery we have in this country, have been invoked. They are in place. They are ongoing. What Kenyans want to wait, and not all Kenyans, particularly workers, Kenyans have the other avenues. If it is ordinary members of public, they are represented by MCA, they are represented by members of parliament, they are represented by senators, they are represented by everybody. They can pursue another way to get what they want out of that.
And FKE has said they would pursue this if you let go of the matter. Before we go to break then, I want to put this to you, sir. Did you then get a raw deal at the end of the day? Even this agreement, which the court refused to admit because FKE was not involved, but to the point that the minimal wage that was gazetted, you already had it. So it's not something government is giving you, you had it. Number two, on NSSF and being board members for COTU and FKE, the court had already ruled that the board NSSF should not continue without first admitting you. So already that also is not something the government was giving. It was already done. So what did you get? What did the government give to you?
Forget about NSSF. Workers have every right to sit on NSSF board.
But that's the deal you signed, sir.
Now what I'm saying, it was because it was part of those delays in gazettement that the government had done. Even the 5% you are talking about, we negotiated it. It didn't come out of blues. In fact, we wanted more than that, and the government said, okay, it is not the right time to have more than that. Let me tell you, Sophie, we don't want to play to the tune of the Federation of Kenya Employers, because they took a center stage as if they were workers' representative, with the sole aim of trying to incite workers against their own organizations. We have skills, we have to know. What is aching them, or what the problem they have is that they are also compelled to contribute 1.5. But let them take their own route as employers and fight without inciting workers, because they don't represent workers. We know what we want for our workers. We know what we want for our members. We know the route we have taken. We know how we'll have to achieve it, and that is the route we have taken, and we will achieve it. And as I have told you, we have specific members who are contributing to the trade unions. Those people you see on social media, those people you see talking everywhere, Bunge, Wananja, and those useless people, they are not members of any trade union. They don't part away with even a single cent paying an organization. It's just politicking. But they must know the Central Organization of Trade Unions has its own affiliates and its own constituents. We represent specific members. And even if they continued, we can narrow it down now for the renewal, an order to renew all CBS, of which will exclude members of public. We are generous. We have said we want 15% across the board. So that everybody, including you, including the president himself, should be able to get 15% a general wage increase. It happened in 1972.
The president appears to be already getting an increase in that budget supplement put down by Rotich, despite, remember, the pay cut he took with the deputy? He's getting an increment. So we'll talk more about that minimum wage proposal. And of course, I want to beg your pardon. I kept saying 0.5. It is 5%, right? That was what was gazetted. So apologies for that. I kept mixing up the figures. So we'll continue that conversation. Also, you want more pay for MPs. I wonder if they've joined COTU. You've expanded membership. We'll talk about that as well.
I'll tell you why.
We'll be right back right here on Checkpoint.